Stables? You'd like that, huh?
I'm a woman.
Yeah, I noticed.
What if one of TV's most light-hearted sitcoms hid some of the wildest behind-the-scenes secrets in television history? From near-fatal accidents and rejected Hollywood legends to secret millionaire cast members and a lion on set, Gilligan's Island was anything but smooth sailing behind the scenes. You've seen the laughs, but you haven't heard the real story. Until now.
Hi, girls. Can I help? I'm very good at washing.
I'm very good at wishing, and I wish you'd get lost.
When it comes to classic American television, few shows have maintained the kind of nostalgic charm that Gilligan's Island has. The series first aired in 1964 and quickly became a household staple, offering audiences a light-hearted escape from reality through the misadventures of 7 stranded castaways. But behind the palm trees and slapstick humor lies a treasure trove of little-known facts, casting surprises, and production decisions that have intrigued fans for decades. Let's begin with a visual mistake that many viewers miss, even after multiple viewings. In one of the more memorable episodes, titled The Friendly Physician, careful observers can spot the Los Angeles skyline, peaking just above the tree line. Considering that the island is supposed to be deserted and in the middle of nowhere, this was a clear oversight. This kind of blooper was more common than many realize, given the constraints of television production at the time. The show was shot on a set in Studio City, California, and while the crew did their best to mask the surroundings, it wasn't always successful. Adding to that, there's an ongoing mystery about the show's main character, Gilligan. What's his first name? Interestingly, the series never clearly states it on screen. Sherwood Schwartz, the show's creator, once referred to him as Willie Gilligan in an early press release, but later contradicted himself. In a later interview, Schwartz hinted that Gilligan may not have had a traditional first name at all. According to him, the only characters in the show to be addressed by their surnames were the Howells, likely due to their elite social status. This left fans with a debate that continues to this day. Was Gilligan's first name actually just Gilligan? The casting process for Gilligan's Island also had its share of surprises. One of the most interesting near misses involved actor Carroll O'Connor. Known to millions as Archie Bunker from All in the Family, O'Connor actually auditioned for the role of the skipper. He was even considered seriously for the part. However, the producers were unsure whether his take on the character would resonate positively with audiences. The role eventually went to Alan Hale Jr., whose boisterous and warm-hearted portrayal helped define the show's tone. Looking back, it's hard to imagine anyone else shouting "Little Buddy" with quite the same charm. Not all actors had to stretch their imaginations to portray their characters. Natalie Schafer, who played the posh and pampered Lovey Howell, was already wealthy before joining the cast. She and her husband had invested wisely in post-World War II real estate in Beverly Hills, making her financial background a match for her role as the millionaire's wife. It's one of those rare cases where life and fiction conveniently overlap, making her performance all the more believable. Dawn Wells, who played the wholesome Mary Ann, also had a story that blurred the lines between character and actor, albeit in a very different way. While Mary Ann was portrayed as sweet and capable, Wells reportedly had one particular weakness: singing. So much so that producers made a creative decision to have professional singer Jackie DeShannon re-record her singing parts for certain episodes. The only time Wells' real voice was used was when her character was meant to sound bad, which fit the storylines. It was a subtle behind-the-scenes decision that most viewers never noticed, yet it helped maintain the illusion of consistency. Over the years, many fans have clung to the idea that Gilligan's Island was purely a light and innocent show. But that innocence was challenged in 2003, when writer Tom Carson published a satirical piece in Esquire magazine, imagining what happened to the characters after they were rescued. The story was deliberately dark and sharply different in tone, reimagining the castaways' lives with surprising twists. Mary Ann having an affair, Lovey revealing her marriage was a sham, and the professor being involved in the Manhattan Project. Most shockingly, Gilligan was said to have ended up in a mental institution. While obviously fictional and written for dramatic effect, The article sparked conversation among fans about how layered these characters could have been under different creative directions. Despite ending in 1967, the cultural footprint of Gilligan's Island didn't stop there. The characters continued to pop up in other media throughout the years. In the 1980s, Skipper, Gilligan, Mary Ann, and the Professor made a special appearance on the sitcom Alf, in an episode where the alien became obsessed with their show. It was a fun crossover that showed how enduring the series had become. Bob Denver, who played Gilligan, also brought back the character for a McDonald's commercial, complete with a familiar hat and outfit. Even decades after the original run, the castaways remained recognizable and relevant. Behind the palm fronds and comedic misunderstandings, some of the actors were taking real risks for the sake of the show. Natalie Schafer, for example, performed many of her own stunts, even into her 60s. While that might sound surprising today, at the time, it wasn't unusual for actors to do their own physical work, especially on shows with tighter budgets. Whether she was falling into water or shivering through ice cream eating scenes, Schafer never complained and gained the respect of the crew for her efforts. In terms of on-screen continuity, several bloopers made it past the editing room and into the final episodes. For instance, Bob Denver can occasionally be seen wearing his actual wedding ring during scenes, even though Gilligan was meant to be single. This wasn't caught during filming and wasn't digitally removed as it might be today, so the ring occasionally stands out in close-ups. Such slip-ups were generally overlooked by audiences at the time, but modern fans watching reruns or DVDs in high resolution have picked up on them. Taken together, these lesser-known facts about Gilligan's Island paint a picture of a show that was far more complicated, creative, and human than it appeared on the surface. It was the product of many unique decisions, some spontaneous, others planned, and held together by a cast and crew that adapted to a wide range of challenges. Whether it was a skyline in the background, a misheard song, or a casting decision that could have changed television history, each piece adds depth to a series that continues to be rediscovered by new audiences. As with many long-running shows from the 1960s, there's a certain charm in uncovering what was going on behind the camera. It reminds us that these were real people dealing with real limitations, making a show that would go on to become more than just a weekly sitcom. For many, it was a touchstone of their childhood, a symbol of simpler times, and for others, it's a fascinating subject of pop culture history that still has more to reveal. When it came to crafting the perfect cast for Gilligan's Island, a number of decisions were made behind the scenes that could have changed the series dramatically. Some actors came very close to landing key roles, while others made unexpected career choices that left a lasting impact on their lives. Add in a few odd production twists and some studio politics, and the show's behind-the-scenes story becomes almost as entertaining as what appeared on screen. One of the more surprising revelations is that Natalie Schafer, who played the wealthy and elegant Lovey Howell, was not as young as her character might have appeared. In fact, she was older than her on-screen husband, Jim Backus, by over a decade. Rather than let this become public knowledge, Schafer took great lengths to obscure her true age. Her contract reportedly included a clause specifying that she should never be filmed too closely. The aim was to avoid drawing attention to the wrinkles that might give her age away. This kind of image control wasn't unusual at the time, particularly for actresses working in television. Producers often made decisions based on visual appeal, and Schafer's desire to preserve the illusion of youth was taken seriously by the production team. Another near miss involved one of Hollywood's most iconic sex symbols, Jane Mansfield. She was considered for the role of Ginger, the glamorous movie star stranded on the island. It's hard to imagine anyone but Tina Louise playing that part, but Mansfield was a serious contender during early casting discussions. However, her third husband advised her to turn the role down. In hindsight, this may have been a missed opportunity, as the role went on to define Tina Louise's career, though not always in the way she hoped. Behind the scenes, there was also some tension between the show's creators and CBS executives. Jim Aubrey, the president of CBS at the time, was famously skeptical of the show's premise. He reportedly disliked the whole deserted island concept and thought the series would work better if it was set at a high-end resort or vacation destination. To prove his point, Aubrey greenlit a competing show with an almost identical setup called The Baileys of Balboa. It didn't fare well, lasting only a single season, and when it was cancelled, Aubrey lost his job not long after. Gilligan's Island, meanwhile, continued to grow in popularity, proving that viewers were happy to suspend disbelief and enjoy the antics of castaways on an uncharted island. Casting decisions are always a gamble, and one of the most interesting what-ifs in television history is Jerry Van Dyke's decision to turn down the role of Gilligan. Van Dyke, the younger brother of comedy legend Dick Van Dyke, was the producer's first choice for the role. But after reading the pilot script, he reportedly called it the worst thing he had ever read and declined the offer. Bob Denver, who had previously appeared on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, was eventually cast and went on to become the definitive Gilligan. Ironically, Van Dyke later agreed to star in My Mother the Car, a series that would go down in history as one of the most ridiculed sitcoms of its time. It's a classic example of how one decision can shape the entire course of a career and a show. Russell Johnson, who played the intelligent and calm professor, had a background that was quite different from the scholarly character he portrayed. Before entering show business, Johnson served in the US Air Force during World War II. He was a decorated veteran who had flown combat missions and later used his GI Bill benefits from studying acting. His path to television was one of perseverance and transformation, proving that even someone with a military background could find success in the entertainment world. The discipline he developed in the service may well have influenced his steady, composed on-screen persona. As Gilligan's Island began to air in the 1960s, some viewers struggled to understand that the story was fictional. The US Coast Guard reportedly received messages from concerned citizens who believed the castaways were genuinely stranded and in need of help. There were even calls suggesting that the government deploy rescue ships. It seems incredible now, but during a time when media literacy was not as widespread and viewers often took TV shows at face value, this was a real issue. The confusion eventually subsided, but it added a strange layer of realism to a show that was never meant to be taken seriously. Another behind-the-scenes disappointment involved the show's opening credits. In the first season, the theme song famously introduced most of the characters by name: the skipper, the millionaire, his wife, the movie star, and then simply ended with, "and the rest." This vague reference was aimed at two characters, Mary Ann and the Professor, played by Dawn Wells and Russell Johnson. It wasn't until Bob Denver, who played Gilligan, used his influence to advocate for his castmates that this was changed. Starting in the second season, the lyrics were updated to include the Professor and Mary Ann, giving them the recognition they deserved. Denver's gesture showed his appreciation for his fellow actors and helped smooth over some of the early tension. Music also played a curious role in the show's development. The original version of the theme song was composed by none other than John Williams, yes, the same composer responsible for the music in Star Wars, Jaws, and Indiana Jones. At the time, he was still known as Johnny Williams and was just beginning his career. Despite his talent, the producers decided not to use his version of the theme and went with a different musical direction. It's one of those surprising footnotes in entertainment history that a future Oscar-winning composer once worked on a sitcom about shipwrecked tourists. Props on the show, though often crude and cartoonish, sometimes leaned into real-world authenticity. The coconut cups the characters drank from, for instance, were initially made from actual coconuts. This effort to make the island look and feel real was short-lived. Over time, the cups began to look dirty and were difficult to clean, so they were replaced with more hygienic alternatives. Still, it speaks to the production team's early effort to create an immersive environment, even if practicality eventually took priority. At one point during production, the show's creators considered expanding the cast by adding a new character, the Professor's nephew. The idea was to introduce a younger figure who could add a different energy to the group. However, this concept was eventually dropped. The reasoning was simple. Gilligan already filled the role of the youthful, somewhat naive figure. Introducing another similar character might have thrown off the balance of personalities on the island. The decision to stick with the original 7 turned out to be the right call, as each character brought something unique to the dynamic. Looking at these details, it becomes clear that Gilligan's Island was shaped by a mix of intuition, timing, and unexpected outcomes. Decisions made in casting, production design, music, and even theme song lyrics all contributed to the final product that viewers came to know and love. It's easy to think of the show as simple and silly on the surface, but the choices behind the scenes tell a different story. There were missed chances, creative debates, and plenty of industry politics at play. The end result, however, was a show that endured far beyond its original run. Gilligan's Island wasn't just a lucky hit, it was a carefully crafted piece of entertainment that reflected both the limitations and ingenuity of its time. Whether it was a near miss with Jane Mansfield, the mistaken belief that the cast was truly stranded, or a music legend's early involvement, each fact adds depth to a show that many remember for its humour, charm, and timeless theme song. For many people, Gilligan's Island was a feel-good sitcom about 7 castaways dealing with quirky problems on a remote island. But behind the palm trees and laugh tracks were complex relationships, career frustrations, personal motivations, and even some underlying symbolism that added unexpected depth to the show. As with many classic series, what happened off-screen was sometimes just as intriguing as the scripted chaos shown on camera. Discord for the castaways shown on camera. One of the more surprising revelations came from Natalie Schafer, the actress who played the wealthy and refined Lovey Howell. While many actors pursue roles for fame or artistic satisfaction, Schafer had an entirely different motivation for auditioning. She later admitted that she only took the role because she thought it would involve a free trip to Hawaii, where the pilot was being filmed. That promise of a short holiday was enough to convince her to try out. But when the show was picked up as a full series, production moved to Los Angeles instead of returning to Hawaii. Reportedly, Schafer was so upset by this development that she burst into tears when she found out she'd have to relocate from New York. People around her thought something tragic had happened, but in reality, she was just dreading the move to California. There's also a theory that's floated around for years about the show's deeper meaning. Specifically, that each of the 7 characters was designed to represent one of the 7 deadly sins from the Bible. According to Sherwood Schwartz, the show's creator, this interpretation wasn't entirely accidental. Gilligan represented sloth, the Howells covered greed and gluttony, Ginger embodied lust, Mary Ann was envy, the skipper was wrath, and the professor symbolized pride. It might seem like a stretch at first glance, especially for a sitcom built around light-hearted adventures. But the theory has been examined in multiple pop culture articles and interviews over the years. Whether this was Schwartz being serious or just playing into the speculation is unclear, but it added a layer of curiosity that fans have enjoyed dissecting. Not everyone in the cast was thrilled with how the show turned out, particularly Tina Louise, who played the glamorous movie star Ginger. When she was first offered the part, Louise was reportedly told that Gilligan's Island would be built entirely around her character. It was pitched to her as a starring vehicle, suggesting she would be the main focus. But once production began and it became clear that screen time was being shared equally among 7 cast members, she was reportedly very disappointed. According to multiple cast members, including Bob Denver and Dawn Wells, Louise believed that being part of an ensemble show hurt her career rather than helped it. She struggled to move beyond the image of Ginger and felt the role typecast her in a way that limited other opportunities. This frustration may have been part of the reason Tina Louise kept her distance from the rest of the cast during filming. While most of the actors enjoyed each other's company and would spend time together between takes, Louise preferred to keep to herself. Bob Denver once noted that while the cast was usually laughing and joking on set, Louise would often stay in her dressing room or remain quiet during downtime. It's not uncommon for actors to have different working styles or levels of social engagement, but Louise's aloofness stood out, especially in contrast to the rest of the group's camaraderie. Over time, this may have contributed to some tension among the cast. Jim Backus, who played millionaire Thurston Howell III, had a different kind of reputation on set. He was generally well-liked and known for his sense of humor, but there were a few quirks that made him memorable for other reasons. According to Dawn Wells, Backus had a habit of taking co-stars out for lunch, but would often forget his wallet when the bill arrived. While this might sound like a harmless joke, it reportedly happened often enough that it became a running theme during the show's production. Despite this, Backus was considered a generous and talented actor, and his portrayal of Howell remains one of the most iconic elements of the show. The character of Mary Ann was also subject to change during early development. Initially, the character wasn't even called Mary Ann. In the original concept, she was named Bunny and was meant to be a secretary rather than a farm girl from Kansas. Bunny was designed to be more of a stereotypical ditzy character, which would have made her very similar to Ginger. Fortunately, the producers decided to revise her role and give her a more grounded, relatable background. The change helped create a stronger contrast between Mary Ann and Ginger, which ultimately made both characters more dynamic. Dawn Wells brought a sense of warmth and realism to Mary Ann that balanced out the more exaggerated personalities on the island. For all its tropical charm, the island itself wasn't located anywhere near the ocean. The lagoon that featured so prominently in the show was actually a man-made set located in Studio City, California, on the CBS backlot. Originally, the producers had planned to shoot exterior scenes in Malibu, but logistical challenges and costs forced them to build their own version of the island instead. This man-made lagoon served the show well for years, becoming a key visual element of the series. It remained on the lot for more than 3 decades before being drained and converted into a parking lot. Another interesting casting decision that didn't pan out involved Raquel Welch. At the time, Welch was still an unknown actress, and she auditioned for the role of Mary Ann. Producers ultimately passed on her, feeling she wasn't the right fit. That choice may have worked out well for both parties. Welch soon went on to become a major Hollywood star, landing high-profile film roles that likely wouldn't have come her way if she had been tied to a long-running television series. Just a year after being turned down, she signed a major contract with 20th Century Fox, securing her place in movie history. Dawn Wells, however, did more than just land the part of Mary Ann. She made sure it would benefit her in the long run. Unlike most of her castmates, Wells negotiated a unique deal that gave her a share of future residuals. This meant that every time the show aired in reruns, she would earn money. It was a smart business move, especially considering the enduring popularity of Gilligan's Island in syndication. While most television contracts at the time offered limited long-term benefits to actors, Wells understood the value of ownership and fought for a more sustainable financial arrangement. Over the years, this decision helped her maintain a steady income, even long after the show ended. These behind-the-scenes details highlight the different ways in which each cast member approached their work on the show. From Schaefer's vacation-inspired motivation to Louise's career frustrations, from Welch's missed opportunity to Wells' financial foresight, Gilligan's Island was built on more than just comedy. It was shaped by personal choices, professional gambles, and human dynamics that didn't always make it to the screen. What made the series work wasn't just the script or the tropical set, it was the chemistry between the actors, even when that chemistry was occasionally strained. The contrast between characters like Ginger and Mary Ann, or between the Howells and the more practical castaways, gave the show its depth and staying power. But knowing what was going on behind the camera gives us a new appreciation for the effort it took to bring that light-hearted world to life. There's a reason people still talk about Gilligan's Island today. And it's not just because of the catchy theme song or slapstick comedy. It's because the show and the people behind it were far more layered than they first appeared. While Gilligan's Island was designed to be a light-hearted sitcom, the production itself was anything but a tropical holiday. The show, filmed largely on a Hollywood backlot, required physical comedy, demanding shoot schedules, and occasionally dangerous stunts. Despite the cheerful tone of the episodes, real-life injuries, close calls with wild animals, and high-stress moments were part of the cast's everyday working experience. One of the most memorable incidents involved Alan Hale Jr., who played the skipper. He was known for being physically strong, good-natured, and always ready to throw himself into a scene, even when it meant potential danger. During filming, Hale climbed a coconut tree as part of a scene and ended up falling. The fall resulted in a fractured arm, but rather than complain or even tell the crew immediately, Hale carried on with the rest of the day's shoot. It wasn't until filming wrapped for the day that he finally informed the producers and sought medical attention. His commitment to the role and his refusal to disrupt the schedule earned him respect from the cast and crew. It's a story that speaks volumes about the work ethic behind the slapstick comedy. Bob Denver, who played Gilligan, also had a run-in with danger during a different scene, this time involving a live animal. In one particular episode, a lion was brought in for filming. The big cat was trained, but working with wild animals always carries a certain level of risk. During one moment, the lion unexpectedly lunged toward Denver. Fortunately, the animal trainer was close by and managed to pull the lion back before any harm could be done. Still, the incident was a chilling reminder of the potential hazards involved in using live animals on set. Denver was shaken but unhurt. The lion, meanwhile, had reportedly torn apart a set of twin beds during the same shoot, which demonstrated just how powerful and unpredictable the situation really was. Incidents like these were a far cry from the carefree island adventure the show portrayed on screen. Although the cast wasn't truly stranded, the filming environment was often hot, physically uncomfortable, and required the actors to stay in character while dealing with awkward costumes, makeup, and prop demands. Working under such conditions wasn't always easy, especially when it involved multiple takes of action scenes, water splashes, or physical comedy routines that required coordination and timing. Even though most of the filming was done on a set, there were still real environmental elements at play. For example, the lagoon set had standing water that, over time, became stagnant and unpleasant. Actors had to wade through it regularly during episodes, even when it wasn't hygienic or comfortable. Bugs, bad smells, and sticky costumes were all part of the job. For the actors, these were the kinds of things you didn't see on camera, but they were definitely part of their daily reality. The demands of filming also created stress in more subtle ways. Although the show had a light-hearted script, the constant need to deliver perfect comedic timing required focus and energy. With a cast of 7 main characters, each with their own personality and style, ensemble scenes had to be rehearsed carefully and executed with precision. If even one actor missed a beat or flubbed a line, the scene might need to be reshot from the top. That kind of pressure was a regular part of working on a sitcom in the 1960s, when digital editing and reshoots weren't as simple or as forgiving as they are today. There were also tensions that grew over time due to how certain cast members were perceived or treated. As mentioned earlier, Tina Louise felt that the show didn't deliver what was promised to her in terms of being a starring role. That feeling didn't just affect her own experience, it affected how others related to her. While there wasn't open conflict, there was definitely a sense of separation between Louise and the rest of the cast. Actors like Bob Denver and Dawn Wells were known to be more social and collaborative, often bonding between takes and during press tours. Louise, by contrast, tended to keep to herself. Still, for all the professional disagreements and physical discomfort, the actors managed to create something special. The show lasted only 3 seasons, but its afterlife in syndication meant that all of their efforts, every fall, every retake, every lion scare, were seen by millions for decades to come. Another important part of the show's legacy was how it managed to remain relevant long after it was cancelled. Reruns kept the castaways fresh in the minds of viewers, and for many children growing up in the 1970s 80s, and even 90s, Gilligan's Island became part of their weekday routine. This created a strange experience for the actors, especially those who didn't make much money from reruns. As mentioned earlier, Dawn Wells was one of the few who secured a smart contract that paid her long-term royalties, but others didn't have that benefit. As the years went on, the show gained something of a cult following, with fans eager to learn more about the trivia, behind-the-scenes stories, and what-ifs that could have changed the show's trajectory. There were even animated spin-offs and reunion movies, but the original series remained the core of the franchise. Despite the challenges they faced while filming, the cast had become part of television history. There's also something to be said about how the dangers they encountered helped shape the authenticity of their performances. When you see Alan Hale Jr. slipping on a banana peel or Bob Denver reacting to an animal, part of what makes it feel so real is the fact that some of it was. They weren't just pretending to be hot and sweaty. They actually were. They weren't always acting scared. They were sometimes genuinely startled. And that honesty, however small, helped ground the comedy in something that viewers could connect with. Looking back, it's easy to romanticize the era of Gilligan's Island as a simpler time in television, but the reality of producing a show like that was far from simple. It took commitment, patience, physical resilience, and a willingness to laugh even when things didn't go as planned. For the cast, these memories were a mix of fun, stress, and pride. They had created something timeless, even if it came at the cost of broken bones and close calls with lions. In the end, the legacy of Gilligan's Island isn't just about the coconut radios or the slapstick misunderstandings. It's about the people who made it work, even when the odds were stacked against them. Their dedication helped turn a quirky show with a bizarre premise into a lasting piece of pop culture. And whether it was Alan Hale continuing to film with a broken arm, or Bob Denver narrowly escaping a wild animal on set, their stories remind us that sometimes the most unforgettable moments in television happen when the cameras aren't even rolling.